Hey folks, welcome to Heroscape Stratagems, the fireside chat designed to get you to the next level of Heroscape play faster than you can say Awashia, Master of Tides, Commander of Seas, Tamer of Beasts, which most people don't know is her full name. I'm joined once again by DogginDays. Say hi, DogginDays.
Hello, Rye Guy, and hello, everyone.
We're going to pick up our conversation from the last episode, King Builds, which we decided to split into two parts. I'd highly recommend watching the first part, but to give a quick recap, we discussed King Builds in Heroscape. I gave a more thorough definition in that episode, but a King build can basically be boiled down to an army whose success hinges on the survival of one unit for the most part. We discussed Greenscale Warriors and all of their Lizard King options, and the Marden Nagrubs and their terrifying Hive Lords. I got all of my Greenscale talk out of my system last time. Doggin, is there anything you'd like to recap or put a tail on the discussion about Nagrubs?
Just, I guess, carrying off from our last conversation where we were talking about the new Age of Annihilation unit that's coming out, the Thyraxis Dragoon. Very interested to get my hands on that and start playing it. I will be interested in how well it compares to Torkulna. Same life, same defense, so there's a comparison to be made there. But yeah, just like you, I pretty much got out everything I can say about the Nagrubs, so.
Hell yeah. With that in mind, we are going to continue down our list of units for King builds. We organized these by the bonding unit, or the unit with the options for the King builds, to organize it that way rather than the Kings themselves. For reference again, our list in no particular order were Greenscales and any dragon, Spiders and Quan or Sujoa, the Amberhide Protectors and a large insect, the Death Reavers plus a unique ranged unit, commonly Major Q9 but potentially Major Q10, Krav Maga agents, Vulcan Mech and Centaborgs, even a dragon, etc. Arrowgruts and Mimring with no Swag Riders and no other bonders as a substitute, and Marden, Nagrubs, and Hive Lord. We covered the Greenscales and all of the dragons, including all of the VC options, and the Marden Nagrubs and all of their Hive Lords, including one VC option and one upcoming Age of Annihilation option, which is very exciting. And we did cover the new Age of Annihilation dragon as well. This is a fun aside. Speaking of the Thyraxis Dragoon, I actually got banned from the Renegade Discord for talking about Thyraxis Dragoon.
Oh, no kidding. So maybe
Yeah.
we put a cap on that.
It wasn't, well, it was about the pricing specifically,
Oh, gotcha.
which is really funny. I didn't leak anything. I actually hadn't seen that design in playtesting. That wasn't one I got spoilered for. But yeah, I I just thought that was really funny. And the funny thing is, it was pretty innocuous too. Because I just broke down, Stuff by Hags is a retailer now, through the Battle Network, which I'm not totally sure why they approved it, to be honest, but it's really convenient for me to order stuff. Like, I ordered the Shiori prizes for the last Lincoln seasonal,
Oh, nice.
so everyone could get one, because Mana was only willing to spend a certain amount on these prize packs, and I'm willing to, yeah, to spend I spend a bunch of my own money putting all these together, obviously, so I was willing to spend a little bit more for everyone to have a good experience. So I can see all of the, like, pricing that, like, retailers get to pay for these, and I don't I don't know if that's, like, what they didn't like me putting out there, but, I just thought that was really funny.
It could be.
I
On that subject of Age of Annihilation and I guess our dragons and king builds, my Age of Annihilation stuff did finally arrive. I was a little late in just dropping the money for it, and I did play a game with Zenithrax, not with green scales. I don't actually have many green scales myself. My buddy has most green scales, but yeah, Zenithrax can definitely see why she's a cut below lots of the other dragons. Yeah. So, I mean, I was stunned at the size of her figure. I knew she got big. Oh my god, I didn't know she was that big. I put her next to Nilfheim, and I thought, "Oh my goodness." Like,
It's kind of
and
insane. Yeah.
it's nuts, and she is very hard to position at times. But I think maybe as she drops a bit more in Delta, she may find a place, a kind of a nice niche in the game as kind of a cheaper high attacker with some neat
Yeah,
skills.
it's an interesting little problem in Delta, because at a certain point, the ranged bonder, like 6 range 4 attack bonding, you can't bring it down to below a certain level with that survivability.
Yeah.
But then at that point, like at 180
with something else.
already, yeah, like green scales aren't the best bonding squad. Like they're really good because they bond with Nilfheim and Quan, which are like some of the best bonders in the game. But they're not that, like, none of their stats are that impressive. There's just a 3-man squad. They have to stick close. So Zenithrax, like, if Zenithrax comes down, it's like at a certain point it flips, and it's like it's still like not worth the price of green scales just to get like one range attack of 6. Like at that point, a Washia is probably like just your cheaper. Like, yeah, it's so interesting. I don't know. I'm curious if like green scale points might adjust at some point, and then the other dragons might adjust to like compensate for Zenithrax specifically. It's kind of an interesting problem for them. Yeah, those wings though, absolutely massive. It's so insane.
The glyphs did not come into play at all. Like they blocked maybe, I don't know, they maybe caused a figure to move 2 extra spaces, and that's really it. And I did my best to, because it was just like a solo game. I was just, by myself playing like 2 different armies and just experimenting. And I was trying very hard to position the glyphs in such a way that they would really hinder the opponent, but it was just easy to avoid them. And
Yeah.
that was a little disappointing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then like, yeah, that's only for melee too. As soon as you have range, it's like, okay, that's a useless power.
I will say, with just one funny anecdote, that game, I put treasure glyphs on the map as well as random heal glyphs from the standard tournament pool, and Zenithrax did actually win. I mean, it wasn't like competitive armies. I was just playing around. But Zenithrax, she took a ton of damage from Mesodemons, and then there was a Kelda glyph revealed on the other side of the map. So I thought, okay, well, I better start getting Zenithrax over there, because if I lose her, then there's no way I can recover. And on the way there, she picked up a healing potion, healed 3 wounds, kept taking on damage, then got to the Keldaglyph, healed all her wounds, then took on more damage. So I counted her absorbing 12 damage for the course of that, and just stupid little fun. Yeah, no, she won. It was absurd. Yeah.
There you go. Pair her up with Kelda, the Kyrie warrior. You've got you've got something cooking there.
You've got a solid B- build. Anyway, but I get we can maybe at some point talk a little bit about the difference between Quahan and Greenscale's Quahan spiders, specifically because the Greenscales need to stay close to Quahan and the spiders don't, and I think that's important. But
Yes. Well, that's actually, we can get into spiders here now, unless you want to start with amber hives. I mean, I'm not
no,
particular.
we can do spiders.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's jump into spiders. And I think already this is, I know I maybe had some hot takes about the green scales in the last episode. I think this is going to be probably my most unpopular opinion already. And that is that Quahan green scales is better than Quahan spiders. And well, first of all, I'll reiterate, I know it's pronounced Quahan or maybe Quahan, and I don't care. I know it's wrong, and I'm going to pronounce it however I want. It's my channel, and I get to say things wrong if I want to. This is an interesting army because when you think of overpowered VC units, this is the one that comes to mind. This is the strongest VC unit ever released by far. This is a figure that you don't want to introduce your friends to VC with, which is Valhalla Customs for anyone unfamiliar, and I'll put a link to those customs in the description. It can be, she's a very oppressive dragon, and she is, her with green scales is probably the best army in the game. Now, why not spiders? Quaon spiders was once considered to be a tier 0 build, and S tier, any like in a league of its own above anything else that exists. I think there's still a tier list out there. I think Vegetarian 18's tier list of Vichi's armies specifically had Quahan as the first and only tier 0 build, and everything else was a step below it. But the thing is, Quahan Greenscales, I don't think even made that list. Like, it just wasn't a consideration because the community jumped on the versatility of the spiders finally having a good bonder. The spiders are very fast. They're a squad of 3, but they're extremely fast. They bond with any predator, which is Quahan, and they have a very strong ability to potentially remove order markers from a figure that they can get 3 engaged to. Now, the roll is pretty high. Yes, the roll is a 16 or higher, so it's not the highest odds, but you get to remove 1 random unrevealed order marker from that figure's army cards, and they don't get to take that turn. That taking an extra turn at the V cheese level is remarkably strong. Truly, every turn matters so much when you have such a high, all of these armies have such high offensive outputs. I mean, every build is consistently getting, even like Wait Then Fire squads are getting like 10 to 12 attack dice per turn or more. Dragon builds are obviously getting a ton with their bonders. Q9 is getting their 3 attacks of 3 from 6 range behind the screen. Like, all of this stuff. Melee armies just pumping out a ton of damage in all kinds of ways. So getting rid of a turn is very strong. Now, here's the thing. Greenscales Quahan won the last 2 major V-Cheese events in the community, the ScapeCon 3 V-Cheese event and the Sir Heroscape Champions Circle League V-Cheese event this year back in June or July. But not Quahan Spiders. In fact, there were Quahan Spiders builds, and they did fine. They were good, but they didn't win, and I don't think they weren't even finalists. They didn't make deep runs. It wasn't like every player that played Quahan Spiders, made like a championship bid. Like, they were all top cut, making, easily 4-1. Like, there are simply ways to get around it. And also in the OST Beaches event, which Greenscales Nilfheim won, no one played Quahan Greenscales at that event. It is a very new idea in the community. Johnny Frisbee, I would say, pioneered it at ScapeCon 3. He obviously was not the first to ever come up with that idea, but he was the first to say, my Greenscales are going to be more valuable than spiders, because the spiders, their large advantage over Greenscales is that they're only 40 points instead of 60. So you can get 4 squads of spiders for the same price of 3 squads of Greenscales. And Johnny said, my 6 defense Greenscales in Raylan's Aura and my Dragon's Aura are going to survive a lot longer with 3 squads than my 4 squads of spiders with Raylin, bringing them only to 4 defense. And that has been my problem I found playing this build. I've played it at the V-Cheese level, and it hasn't impressed me, to be honest. It really hasn't impressed me. The spiders are very fragile. It's not the way I think that a top tier dragon army should be played, which is to protect your dragon behind a screen, and that screen runs interference as necessary, whether it is simply sitting back behind a wall against melee and making attacks, or whether it's occasionally darting out to clog up choke points and distract ranged units. Whatever you need to do, and there's a lot of creative ways to play them. But they only have 1 more movement point than Greenscales, so they're not that much faster. They're a melee squad. They have the same range. They're a squad of 3. Having 1 less base defense and also the same base attack, but then no possibility to increase that easily like the Greenscales do, being close to their chosen Lizard King, jumping them up to 3-4 stats instead of 2-3, suddenly sets them worlds apart from the spiders, who are always going to be at 2-2 unless there's some terrain affecting it, or height affecting it, which the green scales can also get just as easily. So that is my hot take. I think green scales Quahan is the tier 0 build. And I think Quahan Spiders was only so good because people just didn't know how to play against it. I really think Quahan has only been out for a couple years. Actually, Jesus, it's almost 2025. Oh my God.
Yeah. I think she's been out. I think
It's
she's
been
been
a
a while.
while, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I remember when I first kind of vaguely discovered what VC was. That was around the time that I think Quahan was released, and there was a big page on the Heroscapers forums like introducing Quahan, and I remember that being a very long time ago.
Yes, it might, it might actually be a while now.
Yeah. But I will say I do think you are probably again, I've only engaged with the community in the last 2 years, but that would make sense to me that when people first saw Quahan, they latched onto the fact that she's a predator and thought, oh wow, now I can dust off my spiders, and that may have been just the first build that emerged to people, and that was the one that everyone play tested. But I'm sure people recognize she could also bond with green scales, but it just we've got so many green scales armies, and now we finally have a viable spider army. Let's start playing around with that. So I mean that checks out, but again, I don't know.
Yeah, and again, I think this is a similar, like, Mimring in the early days was not played properly. People, from what I understand, people would rush in, try and get as many Fireline attacks as possible, and then Mimring dies immediately, and you're like,
Yeah, you don't
okay,
wanna do that.
the dragon's pretty bad. And now we know in modern competitive scape that the way to do that is just pick away at your opponent from 8 range, which is so far. 8 range is so good. And protect Mimring with, like, Raylin or screening with arrow gruts or anything you can do to keep Mimring alive as long as possible. So it's not the it's just a completely different playstyle, right? From the charge in, try and do as much damage as possible, die right away. Now it's about protecting the dragon. And I think we're seeing a shift. I'm looking at the Book of Quaon. It's actually November 14th, 2012 that this was put up. So, oh my
Wow.
God, it's been
Yeah.
12 years. Okay.
12 years.
I was wrong. Actually, Quaon's been out forever, and and I think that's contributing to why Quaon spiders are sliding down and Quaon green scales are sliding up because people are still advancing the meta, which is super impressive, first of all, for a game this old, with only so many releases officially and then only so many releases custom wise, which, all volunteer run. There's only so much they can put out per year. But the meta is still shifting, which just speaks to the depth and beauty of this game. But there was a lot of, like, the same thing. Like, yes, Quahan with Raylan is great, but you're running your spiders out.
Right.
They're getting off the web attacks that your opponent's letting him get. Your Quahan is chaining to Raylan way too easily and killing Raylan. And now people know how to play around that. I mean, people are able to, like, set up Raylan Q9 rats so that Quahan can't actually hit Raylan. Like,
Mhm.
more impressive play around Quaon spiders. And then I think Quaon spiders loses that advantage of just being sort of unfamiliar. And once that happens, green scales become the way to go. Again, you
Mhm.
need to fall back to what is, I believe, to be the best strategy of dragons, to be super conservative, to be
Yes. Yes. I
very
agree.
safe behind that screen. And if you're getting one attack of Quahan per turn, that's fine as long as your green scales are keeping her safe. She's got decent life fence, 7 life, 3 defense. Now, we talked last time how I prefer that extra defense to that extra life, but 5 defense is still very good if you're in Raylan's aura. So, with 7 life, that's certainly an excellent amount. With a limited amount of green scales, you're playing more carefully. Uh, one
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
one advantage to the spiders, which I will concede, is that it feels less bad to lightning chain off of one of your own spiders. rather than one of your own green scales because they're a little bit more expendable. However, the reason they're more expendable is because you can get more of them because they have worse stats, and so they die a little quicker. So in that sense, I think I'd rather lightning chain off a 6 defense green scale to hit 2 things that are important and maybe not lose the green scale rather than chain off of my 4 defense spider to hit 2 things that are important, lose the spider, and on my next turn I lose 3 more spiders because they only have 4 defense and they're dropping like flies. So that really is spiders can just get out. Spiders can just fall too quickly. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Melee can beat this army. Any melee, I think, if played right. Knights can just rocket in super fast. The coward's reward doesn't apply as hard to Quahan because Quahan doesn't necessarily need to leave engagement. But once
Right.
Quahan is engaged, that's still probably the game. Heavies can just slip past
Yep.
spiders and smack Quahan, and obviously they can do that with green scales too, but green scales are better equipped to not only survive any heavy attacks that do come their way, any stray heavy attacks that attempt to hit them, but they're much better at killing heavies as well. I mean, heavies, if they're in Narex or even just on their own, 2v3s not great, 3v3s not too bad. And so green scales just in almost every way are better, and it's really difficult for me to think of a matchup where, hey, I'd rather have 12 spiders than 9 green scales. I really struggle to think of a matchup that I would take. However, this is the spiders section here. But we need to compare we need to compare and contrast. This is a high level high level play we're talking about here, so we need to be discussing the evolving meta, and I think if you're playing Quahan Spiders, you're a step behind the rest of the field at this point, frankly.
And
Now,
oh, go ahead.
oh, you feel free, jump in.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have experience only with playing a single game with Quahan Spiders, and it was just sort of a casual game. And I have no experience playing Quahan with Greenscales, but I can just imagine that the Greenscales army is much more disposed to that conservative play that you were recommending for Dragon's armies. And I would agree, just from what I know from Torkulna, I found that conservative play in that is also really important too. And the Greenscales, because they have to stay close to their dragon, they're also they're clumping together, which makes it easy for Raylan to affect everyone in that little mob. Whereas the spiders, they're more free, as you said, to run out, grab glyphs, engage people. They can spread out, and it makes it hard to justify Raylan if they're all running around the map and in and out of her aura all the time. So yeah, just from what little I know about Quahan spiders, that makes sense.
Yeah, and the web attack, the entangling web, again, very strong ability. There's a reason Dune is priced so high because you want to put a limit on like how common that ability is, especially because it's just from a casual perspective, like a general public perspective. Losing turns is an unfun way to play the game, so you don't want people
Yeah,
to
fun.
to experience that too often. However, that ability, when you're trying to set it up, unless you're playing a like pure melee with no range support or anything like that, you're going to have to come out of Raylan's aura most likely to set that up. And if you don't get it, you're losing all 3 of those spiders.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's a hard thing to set up, and yeah, you do if you're. I would say it's something it's not really something you play your game around to get. Just if the opportunity arises, cool, roll for it. But I would not recommend going out of your way to surround a single arrow grat with 3 spiders in hopes that you might get 16, and take an order marker off of an arrow grat.
Yep. It's a
Sorry,
bit of a
I
it's a bit of a Hail Mary play, like
yeah,
like Stinger Drain. If you're losing, go for it. But the thing
sure.
is, at that point, if that's the only draw for spiders, why play spiders? Other than the fact that they're cheaper and you can get a few more of them, but why play spiders? I mean, I can't think of a single, like, if I had to list what I think are the 10 strongest V cheese builds, not a single one of them relies on a strong D20 ability to stay relevant. Not a single one. Both Weight and Fire squads, 4th and 10th. Q9 with Rygarn, both Q9 Reavers and Q9 Rygarn. Quan Greenscales, Nilfheim Greenscales, Knights, Heavies. Axe Grinders aren't really a V-Cheese build. But that's 8 right there. Not a single... Aerogruds are close, I think. Pretty close to a V-Cheese build. Not a single one of those. Anything to do with a D20. Not even a single D20 ability on the board. Like, it's about offensive output. It's about dice. That variance, if you're relying on that variance to win games, you're just not going to win very many games. And so that's, that was a big draw of the spiders for a long time because people saw some success. Again, because people just weren't super familiar with how to play around spiders, having been so irrelevant for so long. Probably making it a little easier than it should have been to get those entangling web rolls off. And it maybe saw more procs than it normally would or than it does now.
One interesting play I could imagine with them, and again, I'm not sure if this has happened before, is that if you do want to try for the 16 or higher on the entangling web, you might do it as part of a gamble for initiative switch. So you set it up one turn, try it. If it fails, whatever. But then on the, if that's the end of the round, then initiative switch. And then on the first round of that turn, you've got a bunch of spiders that are set up for it. And then you can use that turn developing other spiders, and then you can attempt entangling web with the ones you set up on the last one, because the opponent wouldn't have had a chance to take them out. That's one interesting theory of how to set it up. But again, you have to hope that you win initiative and get that switch. And if that doesn't happen, they're going to die.
Yep. And then you still need to get the 16 or higher on one of those, which anyone who has tried to drop in airborne will tell you is not always the easiest thing in the world to do. So they're not... You think Quahan spiders, you're thinking wrong. We got to start thinking Quahan Greenscales, and you will see much more success in your games. Now, that's not to say that this isn't still an insanely good army. Like, if you take this to a locals, you will probably win that locals 9 times out of 10. If that's just the only thing, if people aren't familiar with the army, like, again, at the top levels of play, this army has been figured out a little bit. At any old random tournament around the country, this will still see a large amount of success. Because again, a lot of players might roll up not even having seen the card, and you're gonna just dominate. You're just gonna dominate those games, and they will come out of that convinced that this is a tier 0 army. And if you brought Greenscales and played it very conservatively, the ending of each game might be a little closer, but the level of opponent wouldn't have mattered in that outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah. What would you think in a situation where, I guess, like, Raylan was banned or whatever, and you're doing Quahan spiders, Quahan Greenscales, but there's no Raylan in the equation? You still team Greenscales on that?
That's an interesting question. I think if Raylan is banned, Greenscales aren't viable in cheese.
Yeah.
That's
like,
my...
I do think, just independent of Raylan, having that speed and the numbers, that can be handy, if you're not trying to set up amps with Raylan. But I agree that with Raylan, it does make sense to bring Green.
Yes. I suppose without Raylan, that's
because they have more freedom. They can go wherever they want,
Yeah, and Greenscales want to stay closer. They still... And then I don't think the jump from, like, spiders 2 defense to Greenscales 4 defense, I don't think is significant as, like, 4 to 6 with Raylan. Because that jump from 4 to 6, you're expecting those Greenscales to basically never die.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But with 4 defense, I mean, 2 defense, obviously, they're still, like, spiders are getting wiped out pretty quick, but so are Greenscales. I mean, that's, let's be honest, that's not... It's not anything special for a melee squad, especially only a squad of 3 that, again, they have to stay close to Quahan to do. So without Raylan, you might be right. Spiders might be a more interesting choice. And the other thing that you wanted to make sure we discussed was spiders do have one more tool, which I think in this case technically still qualifies this army as a king build. I could be convinced otherwise. I'm actually not totally sure that it's a king build if we add in Estevara.
Yes, yes.
That is the one. There is a trick that spiders have up their sleeve that the green scales do not, and that is Estevara's uh, Spider Queen aura.
Mhm.
She can allow any arachnids, which currently I believe is still just
I
like
think you're
spiders,
right.
if I'm not mistaken. I don't believe there's any VC. There might be more casual. I'm sure there's other arachnid customs floating around on the forums, but in terms of Valhalla customs,
I can check now,
I
actually.
don't believe there are any other arachnid
Yep, they're the only
squads.
arachnids fueled
Wow.
by spiders.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, any people out there, this is you wanna make Estevar a little more interesting. Feel free to take a crack to take a crack at any minis that look spider-like. But they they get to roll an extra attack dice in her aura, which is a range of 6, so it's very large. And you can set her up in a nice spot next to a tree or on shadow, um, anywhere anywhere in a useful spot that's going to cover most of the map, or especially cover the area where you expect Quahan to land eventually, because again, that is one of the most important things about playing a dragon, is knowing eventually where it's going to end up, even if that has to take place in stages. Like, you want to control some ground here on the first couple rounds and then eventually move up to some other ground in later rounds. You need to know where Quahan is going, and so you can just set Estevara in that general area, and then 6 range is actually very large, so that's going to cover a good chunk of any competitive map. And the
Mhm.
spiders get an extra attack dice in that aura. That is helpful, because again, 2 attack is not amazing, especially against most VC's armies. They've got enough backing them, even if it's not with Raylin. Any like knights or heavies are gonna have, you know, gonna be
Yeah.
rocking 4 or 5 defense a lot of the time. So 2 attack is not cracking through. 3 jumping from 2 to 3, that's a pretty significant number for sure.
I was gonna say, it is true that 6 range is, that covers a huge section of the board if you set Estevara up and get her where you wanna be. But I still think I actually I bought Estevara, the figure, and I have a Quahan. I've got 1 official squad of spiders just because 'cause they're so expensive. I bought a whole bunch of 3D prints of spiders specifically because I wanna try out this army. I haven't yet put it together, but, I can imagine before playing it that it's susceptible to a similar problem that Raylin armies have, where if you have a highly mobile army that's being buffed by Raylin, I imagine it's probably easier than one might think to get spiders out of, or to move spiders accidentally out of Estevara's aura. And I do think just the fact that there is an aura at all that you have to be mindful of, that's going to limit where you want to move the spiders, and the spiders want to have that freedom to move everywhere. So um, I I don't know. I like the extra 3 attack for sure, but I can imagine, some challenges with it as well. And the other thing too is, Estevara, no bonding. So that's a whole order marker you have to put on Estevara, maybe 2, to get her set up, just like with Raylan. The cool thing about Estevara is she does have a ranged attack, if I'm not mistaken. She's got that special. So you can still, even if you're not engaging someone, you can still take a little shot. And it's kind of like it's a less powerful version of Sujoa's Sting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it can be a decently strong poison attack, essentially.
Oh, yeah, yeah, it's nothing to sneeze at, so, it is cool that you could spend a turn on her and still likely, at least threaten, you know? And I think she can be good in the end game too. She's got that Cloud of Darkness, I feel like I've seen one live recorded video of a tournament on YouTube where it was a spiders wyvern army. And Estevara was in it, and it came down to the end game, and I think she won. It was like a championship match. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So,
And
yeah,
that's actually a point I wanted to make here, is that Estabara actually does better in lower tier tournaments, not VCs, not, unrestricted anything goes type stuff. Estabara is better suited for Sujoa and Wyvern, who,
mm,
again, as far as king builds go, are pretty bad. um
yeah,
you
yeah,
probably want to move them a little bit away from king build, slide them out of that Venn diagram a little more towards the hero is still very important. Like Estevara, if she dies, is still a big loss for the offensive output of your army. But it's still it's not a king build technically there.
yeah,
I she Buffing the spiders is huge if you expect the spiders to do more work. In a Quahan build, it's all about the dragon. I mean,
right,
it's never the spiders are there again to run interference, to maybe steal some order markers, to get some attacks if you have the opportunity, and of course to screen. But Estevara, I think I like her best with the Wyvern in classic points just because that package is a lot cheaper. Estevara is the price of two spider squad. So you need to weigh your options here and decide whether or not you want two more squads of spiders or whether you want Estamara. Now, the nice thing is, because she's one figure at 80 points, if you've got five squads of spiders and a wyvern sitting at 300 points, and
one
it's
star
only
jumps.
a 17 or 18 figure limit. Well, you still have, if it's a 400 point limit, you still have 100 points left over, but you've only got one or two slots up. Well, then Estevara is perfect for the build. I mean, she's perfect for the build. She's such a good addition in that case. So I think she still works in a lot of formats like that, where the spiders, who are so cheap, blast through your figure limit, and then it's like, okay, I need some heroes, and a support hero that works with this army is absolutely perfect. And in that case, if you're running Wyvern or Sujoa, Raylan, Rise of the Valkyrie there is, I man, she's good because she's one of the best figures in the game, but if you're in a format that allows Raylan, you maybe need to start thinking about armies other than spiders and wyverns.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
It doesn't make sense.
That's the
It doesn't
sad
make sense.
reality. That's the sad reality of the game, is that there are certain armies in classic points with no restrictions. A lot of stuff just isn't going to compete. And I think the nice thing about VCs is that, again, the meta is constantly shifting. The point and figure limits can make wildly different metas, but at the end of the day, it's still going to be about the same 12 to 15 armies. And I think the interesting thing is seeing those shift. Is seeing those armies sort of rise through the ranks through the years, and then fall back into obscurity, and then come back as people develop new tech and develop new strategies. So it's still very active meta, but you're not going to be playing zombies at any VC's event ever. Like, it's just not going to happen. And the same way with like spiders and wyvern. I mean, you could. I guess you could. You shouldn't. This is our
There is,
professional advice.
yeah, yeah. I I I don't think it's VC's appropriate, but there is an interesting VC build I've seen a lot of where it's Estevara, a bunch of spiders, bunch of wyverns, and then Andask from VC. So he gets that reroll on the wyvern's attack.
Oh yeah,
And yeah, so that's a neat build.
yeah. That's a
Like
fun one.
the problem with that is that you and he can reroll a wyvern and then one spider because
Yes.
it's once per turn. So
Yeah.
that's kind of neat. Obviously, you want him for the wyvern, but that has a problem of you have to spend a turn setting up Estivara. You have to spend a turn setting up Andask. Andask Aura is only 4 spaces, so that's another big problem for the spiders is that they run in and out of that very easily. And Yeah, it's just it's all those. It's not a very order marker efficient army, but it is cool that both of the support heroes that go into it, they have a little ranged attack so they can plink as they develop. But I think it's more fun than it is competitive. But again, I don't
Yeah,
have any experience. I've
that
just
is.
seen it, and it looked cool. It looked cool.
Yeah, it is a cool build. And the nice thing about the Wyvern, I have here in my notes that Wyvern and Kozil are too, well, I wrote too cheap. I think too low of an offensive output to be considered a king build. I
Mhm.
don't think you ever expect them to, like, when you roll up with Quahan spiders, again, it's all about that dragon. When you roll up with Wyvern and spiders or Kozil and spiders, you're expecting the spiders to get some kills. Like, you're expecting them to do some things that you normally wouldn't with a king build. And so, yeah, Wyvern is one of the coolest tech in Heroscape, being able to pick up figures and move him, and that makes setting up Entangling Web a lot easier. It makes getting
Right,
your
right.
spiders into any of the auras you want a lot easier. Such a cool figure, man. The Wyvern is fantastic.
And you can have multiple. You can have more than one, which is great.
Yes, yes, yeah, that's another big advantage.
It's a shame that you can't pick up your own friendly figure because that would be an incredible way to develop Andas and or Estivara, but it has to be an opponent's figure. But still, as you said, it's great for and the 7 move with flying. It's very possible that like you have your kind of enemy front line and your front line's about to converge with them. You shoot out a wyvern and it flies over the edge of the front line, grabs someone, and then drops it back in your front line, right in a mob of spiders. And then on the next turn, you can develop other spiders that are not adjacent to the figure you just deposited, and then you could use the 3 that are surrounding that figure that the wyvern just dropped them into, and then try for entangling web. So yeah, I actually don't have a lot of experience playing that army, but it's been one I've wanted to take to a local tournament for a while, just because I think it's got a lot of fun potential.
Oh, it's
Yeah,
it's so
it
much
is a
fun.
it is a cool army for sure.
It's so much fun. But again, just possibly slightly outside of the realm of king builds, because we're talking about it in the context of 2 support figures. I mean, that's, and again, the wyvern there to set up spider shenanigans, not necessarily to be doing the killing. Kozil is right on that bubble, because Kozil actually is 130 points, so not that cheap. And can be quite the bruiser, but I think being a melee only figure hurts. That hurts him. He's very matchup specific in that sense. I mean, if you're facing the squad of fourth, you're toast,
Yeah.
which is just a sad reality.
He does go down in Delta. He's
Yeah,
115 though, I
and
think.
and frankly, I think he's underrated still, even in certain formats in classic points. 8 life, 3 defense with his 2 D20 wound outputting abilities is really nothing to sneeze at, and not to mention bonding with the spiders. But again, it's 1 attack of 4 per turn. You are expecting spiders to do something in that situation. You are expecting them to do something. So in that case, probably not a king build, unfortunately. Sujoa, technically a king build, I think. Not
You think?
so bad.
I
So bad. I mean, like, well, here's the thing. There's good king builds, and there's builds that are technically king builds
that are bad.
that are bad.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, if you lined up like 3 dozen rats and uh if you lined up 3 dozen rats in Erevan Sun Shadow, that's is that technically a king build? I think it is. It's terrible. It's
Yeah.
truly terrible. But he's
On
the
your
figure
definition,
that's
it is a
he's
kingdom.
the figure that's gonna do the offensive output, and if he dies, the potential for that army significantly reduces. So, you
Yeah,
know,
you can't lose ever in Sun Shadow. Absolutely not. You must protect him at all
I
costs.
mean,
Absolutely vital figure. Oh
yeah.
man.
Well,
You are so good if you lose ever in Sun Shadow.
well, because see, the rats are just, I mean, by sheer numbers alone, maybe, but attacks of 1 are just never going to crack through a lot of things. So,
Yeah.
um, I think again,
That's not their job, though, you know? That's not their job.
Sujoa with spiders, well, yeah, that's Erevan Sunshadow's job. I think, and Sujoa is the same way. Like, it's this big 185 point giant insect that you expect to do a lot of damage, but at the end of the day, man, one attack per turn, like, I think that's what disqualifies
Yeah.
a king build. Like, that truly is what makes a good king build from a bad king build, is you need multiple attacks here. All of the dragons we talked about that are good have some form of multi-attack, and Charos is slightly different, but gets damage on the opponent's turn, so it's still technically a way to deal multiple wounds to multiple figures. And Torkulna has the ability to do the auto wound right at trample stomp and then attack, so multiple figures to kill per turn. Kantarna has the double attack. Thoraxis Dragoon, a little different, but Battle Frenzy, multi-attack there, and then the Order Mark removal, obviously. So all of these good king builds have some way to kill multiple figures per turn. Sujoa, even if you get that, get the 1 wound and then the 20 on Charos, like, okay, that's amazing. You killed 1 figure, still everything else on the board to kill per turn.
I think
So
Sujoa has one really cool niche. It doesn't make him competitive. Her, him,
I
I
think it's technically a him. I'm
yeah,
confident in Christian.
I always say her because I think it's like the first Aquila unit, and she was the first female Valkyrie. But anyway, I think it's a him. But one thing that he is very good at is assassinating high life heroes with 3 defense, like certain dragons or Krug. I've had a ton of success because his 4 attack for the poison sting has a good chance of doing that initial wound on 3 defense, and then once you get that rolling, you could roll for chain, and it's not impossible. You drop like 4 or 5 wounds with a poison chain. So
Yeah.
one really cool niche that Sujoa has, but by no means makes him competitive.
Yeah, Sujoa also kind of feels like a tech figure in that she has one specific utility and then terrible utility everywhere else. She's like a Master of the Hunt, except Master of the Hunt is only 100 points and Sujoa is 185 in Classic, which is crazy.
Yeah, but Sujoa does get more interesting. I guess this is a segue. Sujoa does become a lot more valuable if you're running the bees.
Yes.
Using him along with Mellifera. My first tournament win ever at a little local event was with Amber Hives, bunch of Amber Hives, Mellifera, and Sujoa, and I am very glad I took Sujoa along, not just because it helped me. Sujoa helped me fight off. There were like 3 Krugs that day, and Sujoa was great into all of them. She killed like he killed. Like I think like 3 Krugs in different armies. It was that response to Krug. Oh yeah, it was amazing. But also too, just the fact that Sujoa is very important as another figure that's setting up not the frenzy.
Where sacrificial sting.
Yes, and that's a conversation we can get into. But
Yeah.
I think the Amber Hive have made Sujoa at least a new topic of conversation, if not fully competitive.
Yes, I agree. And certainly, obviously, we should mention in Delta, Sujoa gets very
Mhm.
interesting. Drops how much in Delta?
I think last I checked, 145, so down
Yeah, down
uh
40 points.
40 points. Yeah, so
That's a significant drop. I mean, that is an extra squad of spiders or nearly an extra squad of Amber Hive Protectors. And I agree with you that it's it's a close call. I love the bees, and I think Sujo is a little more interesting with the Amber Hive and potentially a little bit stronger. Now,
mm,
we can absolutely slide over to the Amber Hive, and this is another one. So this is the exception. This is my one in the Venn diagram of needing one figure to do all the damage and all of the offensive potential dropping if that figure dies. This is the one like dot that's like outside the Venn diagram, like it's in its own dimension because the Amber Hive Protectors, if you are unfamiliar, is a VC unit that is fairly new. That that is true. That is true. The bees are actually new, not
Yeah,
not Quan new. The bees are only 2.5 years old, so that's like brand new in terms of figuring out that meta. They have
they are metal. I agree with you.
They are metal. They're so metal. And let's find out how metal they are. If for anyone unfamiliar, because we're leaning heavily into a VC squad here, and not all of our viewers will be familiar. They have insect strategic bonding, so before they take a turn with themselves, they can take a turn with any insect hero you control, which currently is just two, Sujoa, and then one VC unit, which we will get into in a second. If you don't take a turn with that insect hero, you can move an attack with up to 6 Amber Hive Protectors you control. Now, their stats are atrocious. They are a squad of 4 for only 50 points, which is pretty good numbers-wise. Their move is 6. They've got flying because they're beasts. Their attack is 1 and their defense is 2. So at first glance, you think, well, okay, taking a turn with up to 6 Amber Hive Protectors with 1 attack is worthless. However, they have a Sacrificial Sting special attack. When attacking a figure within 4 spaces of an insect hero you control, an Amber Hive Protector may use the Sacrificial Sting. If the defending figure receives any wounds from Sacrificial Sting special attack, destroy the attacking Amber Hive Protector. That is a powerful ability because if you use insect strategic bonding to attack with up to 6 Amber Hive Protectors on 6 figures within 4 spaces of your insect hero, you're getting 6 attacks of 4 per turn. Now, granted, you are killing 6 bees if you happen to get all of those kills, but again, a 50.4 man squad, there are very few things, especially in Delta, but even in Classicscape, there are very few things that are worth less than the bees per figure. Like they are extremely cheap at 12.5 points per figure. Not a lot of stuff that is gonna match that. Like knights, even like all of the melee bonding squads at 70 points, like knights, heavies, axe grinders. You're getting value there. Basically everything that they kill, they're fulfilling their points to some extent. And then the nice thing is their 2 defense doesn't matter because, well, they're gone. So you can't, don't have to roll defense if there's nothing to attack, right? um and and on the flip side of that, if they do happen to be facing figures that are equal to or lower point value than they are, like maybe Sacred Band or Goblin Cutters, you still have the option of bonding, and so your bonding hero can take a turn and try and kill something without losing a bee. But they still have an attack of 1 and 6 attacks of 1 or 2 if you have height with your 6 move flying. You can kill a lot of Goblin Cutters that way too. I mean, you can just use that normal attack. And there's a very cool figure, the VC figure, that works super well with that idea of taking normal attacks instead of the strong special. We'll save them for last. Let's talk a little bit more about Sujoa. I want to hear your thoughts on Sujoa with the bees.
Yeah, I'll just say this is in my top 3 favorite builds in the entire game. Torkulna's probably number 1 in my heart, but I absolutely love playing the bees. They are so much fun.
They are.
Yeah, and there's a comparison between them and the Venok Vipers in that the Vipers, as soon as an opponent gets a turn on them, they're gonna kill them, just all of them.
Yeah.
But the point of playing the Vipers is you don't want to give your opponent that turn.
Right.
You want the Vipers to kill what they're going after and then move on to another target. And the bees are good at that. They can. Anyway, you asked about Sujoa, so I'll try to answer.
Oh, we can wax poetic about how fun the bees are. Oh my god,
They really are a bit
like yeah.
The potential to drop 24 dice, like you were talking about how all the top 10 V cheese armies are all about offense potential and damage output. Well, here you go. Not that these guys are V cheese level, but you talk about offense. Holy crap! Like it's absurd.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have 6 move with flying. And this is something else about the bees, because I tend to do more in person stuff. I played a couple online Heroscape. I know I have to get into it. I have to get into it. But one thing that may sometimes be lost or not fully appreciated in online Heroscape is that tiny figures like Amber Hive Protectors, like when you're looking at a board top down,
Yeah.
it is very often easy to forget how well you can hide the Amber Hive. Like if you put them on a bridge, they easily hide behind that tiny little wall. They can even hide behind like little bits of height. So like if there's a cliff and your opponent is looking at the cliff edge, if you hide your bee just under one level of height on their side of the cliff, your opponent will not be able to see them, and that's great because then the Amber Hive can better ambush, which they want to do. So they're tiny little figures, very easy to hide, which is, I think people sometimes overlook the importance and the power of hiding a tiny figure. And that something similar can be said about the spiders, but the bees with their flight, it's amazing. It is just their mobility, I think, is nearly unmatched as far as a mass number of figures. So
Yeah, they're so cute too. Oh my god.
they are adorable. Yeah, yeah. When the tournament I first brought them to, there were a whole bunch of people going by like, "Oh, they're adorable."
They are so cute. And the ones I got, I don't know about you, the ones I got are like a soft model.
Yes.
Like, so they feel really fun to like move around. They're like these soft little rubbery guys. And they're very cheap too, is the nice thing. And
Correct.
they're a new release that helps them a lot. But you can get, these come in packs, because they're not like a typical miniature published
I
company.
think
They're like some
they're
sort of
meant.
animal
I think
thing.
they're meant for like a terrarium,
Yeah, like
or like a
they're
farm.
not meant for like a tabletop skirmish game, so they're super cheap for figure.
I
I
got
mean,
24, 6 squads for like $1 a little piece, and even that might have been overpaying. Like,
yeah,
I'm sure you can find better deals, but like I paid $24 and got 6 squads of Amber Hive. It was amazing.
yeah,
So,
they're
if
so
you wanna have a good time,
yeah.
pick these guys up.
I
Yeah.
I had we have a store employee at Mana that hops in to tournaments if we end up with an odd number either at the start or if someone drops, which is very kind of them. And on the last tournament, the Lincoln Seasonal 6, I had them play bees for a little bit, and they every time I've seen them since then, Lincoln Seasonal 7, every time we stopped in at Mana, they've just been like, when is the next time I can play the bees? They
Nice,
just like
nice.
like everyone play the bees. You will fall in love with them.
They really are
They're
wonderful.
they're amazing.
Even in my own little group, everyone puts that, gif of Nick Cage, "Not the bees, not the bees." The bees fly,
The
which
bees
is
fly.
just
They fly now.
they fly now. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
But,
Oh, very useful. Yeah, yeah. Very
I guess, yeah, so
which
the size is really important, their ability to fly, so you can hide them behind cover, and then the next turn just whoop, and they just surround whoever they're going after.
yeah.
They can deal with squad, they can deal with heroes, and I just the fact that you can decide to you don't have to bond with the hero. So you can you can set up your hero for the range on the sacrificial sting to get that set up, and then the next turn, yeah, my heroes are in place. They're good, and I'm just going to throw a bunch of bees at the opponent, and it's cathartic, is what it is. It's very cathartic. But one interesting thing to note about the bees, too, is if you look at their card. Let me pull it up. This is a really important detail that has been decisive in winning some games with the bees, because, and we'll talk about this, but with the bees killing themselves as they attack, even though they can win many games, but they tend to win very closely because there's so few of them left after
Mhm.
they get their damage done. So it's rare that the bees like sweep a game unless they're facing like a very small number of figures. They tend to do well into that from my experience. But usually if they're facing a comparably sized army, if they win, it's kind of close. But this is the point I want to come to. On Sacrificial Sting, when attacking a figure within 4 spaces of an insect hero you control, not 4 clear sight spaces.
Yes.
So, which
Yeah.
is preposterous.
Very huge.
But I mean, it kind of makes sense because the bees, they communicate with their queen via pheromones. They don't need to see their queen for, so it's very thematic,
Oh,
but it also is mechanically, holy crap. Like I played a game on Ember Canyon Road, which is like the little big peaks. You're right. And so that is the bees.
oh man.
They just do so well on that map because they can hide on the top level of their peak without being that no one can see them.
Yeah,
They can just jump over to the other enemy peak immediately in one turn. And the best part, something I really enjoy about them, you can plop your king figure, your Mellifera or Sujoa, right on that glyph in the center road, and
out of
they
sight.
can still affect the 4 spaces
Yeah.
onto the opponent's peak, even if they can't see them because it just says 4 spaces. So
Nasty.
there's a lot of little details like that that can be really it's easy to forget about with the Amber. I remember I was playing someone and they were like, "Wait, but don't you have to be in 4 clear sight spaces?" I was like, not according to the card, So and then they were like, "Oh my god, that's so busted," And so now uh, your initial question was to Joe. I know I'm just getting all nerdy about the bees, but
Well,
I think
that's what we're here for.
yeah, right. But I think what is it? They're not. There are a lot of situations they're not good in. And I'll talk about one that I encountered a while back. So I have experience playing mostly bee armies with Mellifera, which is the VC unit you were talking about, Mellifera and Sujoa. So most of my experience comes from like 6 squads of bees or however many I brought. And then Sujoa, wait, no, 6 squads, that's 24 figures. I think I brought 4 squads. So 4 squads of bees, Mellifera and Sujoa. That puts you at around like 450 or whatever points. And so I'm used to having 2 heroes that you can bond with and 2 heroes you can set up with. It's interesting that you think Sujoa is better for the bees than Mellifera, and I will be curious as to why. But usually, I like having.
Oh, no, sorry. I meant Sujoa is better with the bees are better for Sujoa than the spiders are. I apologize.
Oh, I got you. I got you. Yeah.
I actually think I would love to discuss the differences because I think there I think one is better than the other. I won't say which. I'll want to keep your opinion free from mine for now. But there are interesting discrepancies. But continue.
Yeah. Well, I think one reason to have one advantage of having both of them is, and this is kind of this is an interesting unit because this is where our definitions of what a king build is, like the definition I went into this episode with, and then your definition with the Venn diagram. This is kind of where our definitions begin to collide because I would generally think that like a king build, and you even mentioned that it's not. This is kind of an unusual case where it'd be considered a king build, but I would still say when you lose all of your insect heroes, you're doomed.
Oh yeah,
You're doomed. You're doomed. You've got no hope.
That's I think what makes this the exception to the king build, even though they are not they themselves with their turn are not producing the damage output, but you have 25% of the offensive potential that you do without them. And I think like it's still their aura that is producing the offense on the bee's turn. So in a passive sense, they are still producing the majority of the damage. So I think that's why, yeah, this is definitely still a king build. Although you could argue having both Mellifera and Sujoa is not a king build because there is no one king. It is just kings. But I would argue again that's probably the better way to do it. We're not saying king builds are the way to go. We're just comparing king builds that exist. In a lot of these instances that we've talked about, probably better not to have a true king build just because of that weakness of, well, Sujoa died and now I have 1 attack bees. That feels pretty bad.
Sujoa is the point is you have to go with one or the other, if not both. But you have to pick one. You have to pick one at the very least. Sujoa can be great for dealing with a dangerous hero that the bees might face, like a Krug. Krug is actually a real big danger for the bees because he soaks up so much of their damage, and so many bees will die.
Oh yeah.
And Krug also, I found this facing a Krug arrow gruts. It was a weird army. The person brought a couple of blade gruts, and then I think like Tornak, and then a couple arrow gruts, Krug, and a Swag Rider.
Oh,
So the point is a huge number of figures on the board, and one of those figures is soaking up a ton of damage. And so my thinking, the first game I played to it, I lost just because it's too many damn figures. And then the second game I played, oh my god, that was the narrowest victory I've ever. Just insane. So it was a slog for me on both occasions. But
yeah.
what I was thinking was, okay, I had 16 Bs and 2 heroes, and this guy has, maybe 20 plus figures. How am I gonna take out all these cheapo little gruts, with my figures, while I have to still deal with Krug? And I kinda thought, like, I don't wanna be sacrificing into Krug because I wanna save my bees for dealing with the lowly gruts. Because even their one attack has a good way of killing a grut without killing themselves. So I thought I need to keep them alive for the gruts, but Krug was still a real problem because of that 8 life. And so Sujoa was handy for those situations where you want to do a lot of damage into a hero you don't want to be sacrificing your bees onto. That's just going to soak up damage. And so that is handy. And Sujoa is obviously very fast. Sujoa is the most survivable of their 2 champions with 6 life and 4 defense. Whereas the other one that we'll talk about is 4 life, 4 defense, so a lot squishier. But Sujoa is also a lot more expensive. In Delta 145, in Classic 185. But I think the Amber Hive are now at 45. So if you pick Sujoa, that's the other hero, Mellifera, plus another squad of Amber Hive who are now at 45 in Delta. So you're all going with Sujoa. You can just you just inevitably run less bees in that army. Again, I like having both, but I think Sujoa is still not quite the best pick for this army. It's kind of nice that he can absorb more damage, so he'll be on the board longer, and therefore he'll be providing the buff longer. But I think if you're good about protecting Mellifera, however you say it, if you play well and protect Mellifera, I think I'd still prefer that. You just have to realize that Mellifera could die much more easily, and you have to be a lot more. I guess you really have to be mindful of the fact that Mellifera could die more quickly than Sujoa. So, kind of a tough. I think Mellifera is better than Sujoa, but Sujoa has some neat tools to help the bees out with problem units they don't want to be sacrificing into. So that's kind of my view on that. On those 2. I don't know if you had anything.
Really excellent points. I agree with you on pretty much all counts, including that I think it is Mellifera, not Mellifera.
Okay.
And so
I know Mellifera, that's Latin, right? That's the Latin term for bees.
that it's beyond me. I think like Maleficent. That's what I'm pronouncing it as, like Mellifera, like Maleficent.
Yeah, I thought I read somewhere that Mellifera is it's like it's like the technical scientific term for a bee.
Those clever little VC designers.
Yeah. So yeah, according to Wikipedia, the Western honeybee or European honeybee, Apis mellifera, is the most common of the 7 to 12 species of honeybees worldwide. So you learn a little biology too, diving into
that's right. Their next release is going to be a human fighter called Sapien.
Well, there you go. There you go. So, Mellifera, yeah.
It is a nice name. Yes, I agree. First with your point that Mellifera is the better option. Secondly, with your point that Sujoa does provide a cool utility to the bees. Her hero killing potential with the absolute squad devastation of the Amber Hive is not the worst. I think what brings her down, and you mentioned this indirectly, but I think I think we can nail down exactly why on the board that is. I think Sujoa needs more numbers than Mellifera does, because as we'll discuss Mellifera increases the attack efficiency of the bees even more.
Mhm.
And uh, let's say you have Sujoa sitting with 6 bees around here. They're making attacks on knights 4v4. You expect 3 of those to go through. So you've killed 3 knights, 3 of your own bees. On the knight's turn, they're going to kill the remaining 3 bees. And so you're left with 3 knights. Mellifera, as we'll discuss in just a moment here, can increase the odds that more bees will get killed. So it might end up 4 knights, or if you're lucky, 5 knights are actually taken off the board. And so now, when that last knight kills that last bee, you're left with 1 knight instead of 2. And so in that case, you actually want more bees around for Sujoa because you're going to lose more on your opponent's turn. And as you explained, Sujoa is the price of Mellifera plus a squad of bees, so you're likely to actually run less bees. And I think what
Mm.
she wants is actually more bees than Mellifera does for that specific reason. Does that make
No.
sense?
Yeah, no, it's a great point.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny you bring up the Knights because that is a matchup that that's a game I lost the last time I played.
Yeah,
To get the
tough one.
bees into Knights. Yeah, well, and the reason I want to I think about it often is because I hate to sound like I'm tooting my own horn, but like playing the game, I really did think I played the bees pretty like, I know that sounds really obnoxious, but, like, it's mainly because I struggled to think of how I could have played the game better. Like, I set the bees up on height, I kept them from getting multi-engaged, and I really did the opponent brought a lot of knights. He brought Sir Auric, um, maybe one other champion, I'm not sure, and just a ton of knights, and, the bees just had trouble getting through that, for, defense, and the points trade-off was it was good when it happened, but even after I just killed so many knights and there were still so many left that I had just run out of bees to deal with. But then that was another army where I was running Sujoa, Mellifera, and 4 bees. So maybe if I had Mellifera and more bees, I could have overwhelmed it, but,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah. Or even Sujoa and more bees. It's possible.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing, like you said, yeah, when there are knights left over, they're gonna kill every bee they deal with. So that may have been what I was doing wrong, is that I was just exposing them too much, and I should have played more, I don't know, conservatively against the knights and picked my targets more carefully. I'm sure there's something I could have done, but it felt like I was playing perfectly, and it was tough to get through. So I think a lot of times when bees are facing an army with a similar number of figures, that can be challenging. And as you said, that's where Mellifera is helpful in her frenzy ability. And I guess we can move on to Mellifera if you're good with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
I'll
yeah.
I'll just add that Sujoa, you mentioned Sujoa being a little tankier. In terms of strategy with the bees, it's very important to know when you do actually need to take a turn with your bonder to get a kill, because that is a bee you're not sending to their death.
Mhm.
And I've seen people lose games where all of a sudden, oops, I'm out of bees. And
Yeah.
you still need the bonding to do things. And so and that's part of the strategic bonding, and that's another thing that makes this army so interesting and so much fun to play, is making that decision can be tough. Sujoa has an extra attack dice, and so is it just a little bit more likely to get through something, even if it's just a squad figure that she's attacking, not going for the poison sting. But I do really like your example of like using Sujoa to get through a tough hero that they don't want to sacrifice themselves to. Because I'll state just for pure clarity about that discussion. The bees die if the defending figure receives any wounds, not just if they destroy the figure. So for a squad figure, obviously any wound kills them and the bee goes off. But you could make 6 attacks of 4 into Sir Gilbert and do 5 wounds and lose 5 bees and not kill Sir Gilbert. Like that is a waste of bees at that point.
Yeah.
That's a mistake to make
That
during the game.
It's a very good point, and it brings me to something else I've thought about with the bees, in that if you're sending them to kill a hero, which is viable, sometimes you do want to do that to is a high
Sure.
life figure, but I would only recommend that if the high life figure doesn't have a whole lot, like a huge volume of squad figures to deal with.
Yeah.
Like in that Krug Arrogret scenario, it's like, well, I'm still gonna have to deal with the Arrogrets at some point, you
Right.
know? And like I need my bees for that. So the problem with the bees is when you're attacking a hero, it feels really bad when you lose a bee and your bee only does a single point
Yeah,
of
one
damage.
wound. Yeah.
And of course that's going to happen with any squad, but you just sort of accepted that with squads, you know, and it can you can sort of go after the most expensive squads that are on the board for a good points trade-off. That's what the bees are.
Mhm.
Even, you know, trade-off exists.
Yep.
That's something you think about no matter what army you're running. Like what's the best way to trade my points with the opponents? But the bees, that is explicitly on
Yeah.
their card when
With
they
it's literally a mathematical transaction you're making with the killing. Yeah.
Right, right,
Yep.
and so, you really have to think about who's gonna give me the best return on this because you will be they're going to die, and you want them to die to do that damage. Now it is cool, I do think this is cool about the bees in that they will only die if you do damage, so it's sort of they're sort of built around the idea that you will get some return on them if you kill one of your own. But the question is, how do you maximize that return? And a lot of times attacking, you know, a hero with 4 or higher defense, I don't like doing it.
Yeah.
I like going after heroes like Zenithrax would be a good target for B.
Oh, yeah.
Because Zenithrax has 8 life, and well, actually, I'd take that back. That's kind of a Krug situation. I should say Zenithrax would have. This is what I meant. Zenithrax would have been a good target for Sujoa because
Mhm.
Sujoa, with the, you know, she's got a lot. Or Zenithrax has many lives and 3 defense. Sujoa's 4 attack with the special is likely to do that initial wound of damage to start rolling for the chain. You could take a lot of wounds off of Zenithrax with just Sujoa, and then maybe finish her off with a bee or 2, and you still got your host of bees to deal with whatever Zenithrax brought in tow. So I in that specific like 3 defense and 6 or more lives, it's nice to have Sujoa, I will say. But
Yeah.
Mellifera is cool because, as you said, the Frenzied Swarm, it's 14 or higher, which is more like that happens more often than you might think. And it's also cool to note that it's with normal or special attacks, so you don't have to sacrifice to Frenzy with Mellifera. And it's a figure within 4 spaces of Mellifera. You know, like your bees want to be within 4 spaces of one of your heroes, but in order to frenzy, they have to be targeting a figure within 4 spaces of Mellifera. It's not like the bee itself has to be in 4 spaces of Mellifera to frenzy. No, you have to be targeting a figure that is within 4 spaces of Mellifera. So it little nuance there that sometimes it's easy. I've forgotten a lot of times when I'm playing, like, oh crap, like it's not a bee within 4 spaces. I have to be targeting a figure. But one play I like doing with the bees is, occasionally leaving one alive, just normal attacking with one to clog up an enemy and hold them down, so the opponent has to spend a turn killing that, bee instead of developing into a better position or disengaging from that bee. Like, I every now and then, you know, I remember there was a game I played where there was a bunch of Microcorp agents walking up a hill, and I thought, "Okay, I don't want them getting height, so I'm gonna put a bee here, and they have to deal with that." And that buys me a turn to respond with bees next turn, you know. And another interesting way that Frenzied Swarm plays is against vipers. Like if you got a bee next to 2 vipers within frenzy
Yeah.
range,
Yeah.
you could normal attack 2 times and kill 2 vipers. That's not a bad trade off,
Yeah.
and you don't lose your bee. So that's there's a couple times where you might want to do a normal attack, but mainly Frenzied Swarm is there to help ensure that you get you do the wounds and sacrifice your bee that turn because the next turn when the opponent gets his turn, he's going to kill any bees he's engaged to.
Yeah. And let's go over this card real quick, just for anyone that is not familiar with Mellifera. Mellifera is an insect hero, so bonds with the bees, obviously. A move of 6 and a defensive 4 with 4 life, and a melee attack of 3. She does have evasive 2, which is nice. So she adds 2 defense dice when she's rolling against an attacking figure who's not adjacent. That actually does help her survivability quite a bit.
Yeah.
And then the important one we're talking about here, Frenzied Swarm. After common insect you control attacks a figure within 4 spaces of Mellifera with a normal or special attack, roll the d20. If you roll 14 or higher, that common insect may attack again with a normal or special attack. The nice thing is, you actually can switch to. If you make a normal attack, it doesn't work. You decide, well, I really want this figure gone.
Right.
I'm going to take the special attack. You can pop them off the board. Or, you attack the VNOC Viper, and right next to that is a knight. Hit the VNOC Viper with the normal attack first. You get lucky on the frenzy, and then you can hit the knight with the 4 attack special. So
Yep.
so that is nice being able to switch. And I'm trying to think of a situation where you do it the other way, where you make the attack of 4, it didn't work, and you're like, actually, I'll go down. Actually, I'll go down to the normal attack.
Well,
There
it
might be
maybe the reverse. Maybe the reverse. If you try it into the night, it fails, and you're like, well, I'm probably not going to get swarm again. Might as well
sure,
just
go for the Viper. Sure,
Yeah.
yeah, that absolutely could work. And this Frenzied Swarm 14 is very important for giving the bees slightly more utility on that normal attack, because it, again, one of the biggest problems with the bees is not keeping track of how many you have. Not, every time you get a kill, you're trading 1-to-1, but every time they get a kill, you're just losing figures. So you want to keep that from happening as little as possible. I played a game recently in online Heroscape, which I did lose, but I don't blame the bees for that. I blame Raylan. No. Um, it was the format was a scouting party, so there was a partial heat of battle. We could place about 200 points anywhere on the map, and then we placed the rest of the army in the start zone. Now, Raylan being 135 in Delta meant I could place her in the center somewhere, and then nothing else. Mellifera would have to sit in the back. It'd be basically one squad of bees, and that was it, and that didn't feel worth it to me. What I ended up doing, and it took me a long time to figure this out, what I ended up doing was placing Mellifera 4 spaces away from my start zone, where I would place Raylan to not count towards that total, and then placing a bunch of bees just at the edge of Raylan's aura. Now, I gave up the entirety of the high ground to my opponent. I gave him total control of the top of the hill with like 3 squads of Mohicans and Brave Arrow. And it looked pretty bad at the start. But I won that first initiative, and with that turn killed 4 Mohicans. Because they flew out of Raylan's aura, and 4 of them died. And so those 2 bees that were up there died, sure, but then I just flew in 6 more, and they all died. And it doesn't matter that they're not in Raylan's aura; they're dead. And so that's kind of the beauty of the bees here, is that really doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter that they have 2 defense, and when it came down to the end game, I only had 1 squad of bees left. That was the point where, first of all, I was taking turns with Mellifera to get kills on Mohicans to ensure that I was saving as many bees as possible, but I was also starting to roll for normal attacks. Even if they weren't as likely, it was just 1v3s or 2v3s, I was still making sure that I would be able to bond. And I did get a kill with a frenzy. I rolled a 2v3, it got blocked. I rolled the frenzy, and I got a 2 out of 2, and it went through on the Mohicans. So it's such an incredible, because you don't get to do that with Sujoa. Like, you've got 1 dice, you've got 1 shot to roll just 1 skull, maybe 2 if you have height. And if it doesn't go through, well, okay, you didn't kill the bee, but they're just going to kill you on your turn. So maybe you just should have used the sacrificial sting. Like with Sujoa, I really think there's so few reason to ever go for the normal attack, because that risk is so much higher if you don't get the kill, because you don't get another shot at it. And so again, that bee's just dead. But with Mellifera, you you get to preserve your bees a little bit longer, because that risk is softened by a 35% chance to just attack again, and that can make all the difference there.
Yeah, the 14 or higher it's good.
It's good. It's yeah. Well, and especially with how many bees you're attacking with. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot of rolls you can make.
One other point about the bees is that because they are a sacrificing army and they move so fast, it's whenever I play them, it feels like an army where my board development is constantly reversing. It's like move out, they spread out. I set up my attacks, get the attacks done with, and then okay, I'm back to square one. Now I got to do it again, kind of. And so it's like they come in waves, or sometimes if your opponent is all melee and you've got some time where you're not being shot at, you can set up a whole bunch and then just fire them out from your little line that you're setting up, but it is an army that I feel like you have to expect that you're not going to have a ton of board control. They're just going to be dying so fast, and the turns you spend setting them up, you really shouldn't be spending too many turns like setting them up. You know, each turn you have on them, you want to be hitting with them. So,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. I
anyway,
I
that's one other
would
point about 'em.
I would love to talk about having both bonders here because the
Okay.
obvious advantage is that if one of them goes down, you still have the option to do the sacrificial sting, and you also get the huge utility of frenzied swarm of Mellifera and also the hero killing tech of Sujoa that the Mellifera army frankly is not super equipped to deal with. Like they're not
Mhm.
equipped to deal with like a Sergeant Drake or yeah, anything with like 4 defense or more. It's just yeah, doing 1 wound to kill a bee really hurts. So that added utility there, and then the security of both bonders is super nice. The downside is, like you said, 4 squads of bees is not a ton of figures, and I can see that's 18 figures right there. If it's a 24 figure limit game, I don't know if I feel wonderful about taking both bonders because if my opponent has more figures than I do, I always want to be the one that has at least as many figures as my opponent, if not more,
Mhm.
because I'm losing them on my own turn, and that's a one-to-one trade that you can't change. If my opponent has 20 orc warriors. If my opponent has 20 blade gruts and Grimnack,
Oh,
if I trade 16 bees for 20 blade gruts, Mellifera is not going to be able to take down the remaining blade gruts and Grimnack. So that that is really it's an interesting question. I'm curious what your thoughts are about that the two big advantages to double bonders versus the lack of numbers that you get. I mean, with Mellifera, that's 2 squads. With Sujo, it's 3 that you could potentially have 3 extra squads there. Do you think
no.
that is kind of the limiting factor there? Is that point figure combination of where they work best?
Yeah, yeah, I would say so. And personally, I do like having both of them for the reasons you said. And even Sujoa at 4 attack, it's good, and that's 5 attack on height, which they can probably get a lot of times with their 8 move flying. But even that's not great into a whole bunch of super high defense figures.
Yeah.
So it's tough, but it is nice just to have that in your army as an option in case you go up against a Q9. But the another thing I do like about having and as you pointed out, like you're sacrificing more squads of bees, and thinking on it, that is probably why I lost that game with the knights. My army was not equipped to handle that many tough figures with Sujoa and Mellifera and 16 bees. It's just I was losing too many bees, not just with sacrificing, but the ones that just failed to
Yeah, the
sacrifice or
Sim
do any damage, and they just sat there, and then on the next turn, the knights just cut them down.
steamroll, yeah.
So, but if I had more bees, I might have just been able to swing that in my favor. But yeah, so maybe it produces a few more bad matchups, but I like you said, I'd like the options that they provide. One aspect of having two heroes for the bees to bond with, in addition to the extra insurance, is you can set up more hexes on the board that are eligible for sacrificial sting.
Oh,
So
true.
you can kind of spread out your heroes, maybe put Mellifera on one side, Sujo on the other, and then your bees have so much more freedom to just go wherever they want to sacrifice into people. So that is another aspect of two heroes that I like. I have only experience playing Sujoa bees, not Mellifera bees only, and I didn't like Sujoa bees.
Yeah.
I got pretty
Yeah. I
clobbered.
it's just not
Um,
quite it's just not as a solo bonder, it's certainly not up to Mellifera
Y
standards.
yeah, and even with Mellifera, it's an army I wanna try, but it's a similar thing to, like, the Quahan Spires with, Lin. you have a figure that is creating an aura and you want your figures to stay in that aura, but their figures are so mobile that it's very easy for them to fly out of that aura. But that's why I like having both of the heroes, is that aura is now duplicated, and it just covers more hexes on the board. So your bees, you set up a really big playground for the bees, and then anytime your opponent enters anywhere in those, whatever, like 20 hex, or no, that's like 16 hexes that they would.
Yeah.
No, way more, way
Yeah,
more, way more.
well,
Yeah, forget my math. I'm thinking about a
diameter.
yeah, I'm thinking about adjacency to a double space figure, but no, like you really do cover a huge area of the board
Yeah,
with two
that's interesting.
figures. So, and yeah, it just, anytime your opponent walks into that aura, your bees can just go wherever they please, and so that's a big utility to having two heroes as well.
Mm, yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's a trade-off you'd have to determine, I think, on a tournament by tournament basis.
Yeah,
If you're running, if it's a 20-figure limit and you've got 16 bees and you expect to see 20-figure armies, it might be tough to take both bonders. It might be worth, well, I guess 20 figures isn't a great example because 5 squads of bees and then Mellifera actually puts you over, so you're already dropping figures. But we'll say 21. It might be worth dropping a bee there, and then with your last 100 points taking a range figure or something, taking Savaris, something that can deal and maybe draw people into your aura, rather than trying to fit both bonders in and being well below the figure limit. That is definitely something to consider, because I think if you were at a numbers disadvantage with the bees, it's a pretty insurmountable.
it is. It's
Almost an insurmountable. I mean, that I don't want to say it's an auto loss, because maybe your bonders absolutely pop off and Sujoa gets a kill every turn, but
I think you need that to happen.
unlikely.
If it doesn't happen,
Yeah.
a lot of trouble.
The other, like, out of game advantage of Mellifera, also way easier to fight than Sujoa.
True.
Like, at that, like, just in terms of, like, practical advice here, Mellifera, oh my gosh, you can get that figure for like $10, I think. Comes in a pack with some other stuff. It's like a it's like a life of the bee cycle thing. You can get it for like $10, maybe less.
It's an educational toy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a toy for kids technically. And Sujoa, is like a $150 sculpt if you get the official one. Now I have mine 3D printed and painted because
You got a 3D print. Yeah.
I'm not a fool. And there's some really cool stuff. I wish I had done this with mine. I didn't think about this at the time, because I hadn't gotten into transparent prints yet. But you can actually print Sujo's wings to be transparent like the original, which I think is really cool. And then print like the rest of the body in the solid resin or whatever. I wish I had done that. I think it would look way better, but either way,
That's all that matters.
3D print, definitely the way to go. I mean, yeah, I got the figure. It still looks good. I got the figure. 3D print is the way to go there, unless you're rich, which is fine, if that's what you want to spend your money on. But either way, whether you're buying an obscure eBay listing or like having someone 3D print it for you, Sujo is way more difficult to get your hands on than Mellifera is, who is the better bonder in the game anyway. So another reason to recommend the Queen Bee, who is merciless, which is kind of an interesting personality.
Oh yeah, merciless. Yeah,
That's kind of funny. I mean, when you think about it, she is sending her hive to die for this war. So that is kind of merciless. That's kind of intense.
It's pretty merciless, but I think the bees are prepared to do it. They understand that's their lot in life.
They're protectors. That's their class.
They are protectors, yeah. And we haven't even talked about one of the most meta picks for this army. The bees are relentless, so you bring in that Kosumet. Now we're talking.
My God,
What a terrible
coming up with. Oh my God, yeah, it is listed in the synergy. I just skimmed over it because my eyes.
And Sujoa is relentless too.
My
oh my goodness.
my eyes don't.
Number
My eyes don't even register Kosumet as like a word. It's just like a blank section in my brain. Like I'm just reading through the book here. It's like synergy benefits received from insect hero Mospera. And then this blank section, that's weird. And then Warden, they immune to wardens of Izrax. Wow, that is funny. Yeah, on that note, they also benefit the Knights of Blackguard with their relentless army attack bonus.
Oh,
If your whole army is relentless. Although if you take a bonder, I guess it has to be Sujoa in that instance. That's a fun little combo if you want to try sometimes. 2 squads of bees, Sujoa plus the Knights of Blackguard. Try your luck there.
And if you hate winning your games, you can always bring in Kosumet, you know?
Yeah. If you like spending 75 points on the piece of toilet paper that stuck to your shoe, that's like that's the figure for you. That is really funny.
It is.
I can't
Like Kosumet, was he like a pharaoh or something? Like,
well,
I heard about it.
and the funniest thing is he wouldn't even benefit like their main offensive ability, which is a special attack. I mean, that's like he works with them in like the most technical, like loosest way possible. The bit to even set that up to get the extra die on a normal melee attack, that is so funny. I think if you're okay, I think if you bring that to a tournament and you bring Kosumet and your opponents all let you set up that relentless attack bonus and let the bees get off attacks of 2 boosted by Kosumet, you should probably leave the elementary school that you went to. You should probably stop beating up children at this game.
Right.
That's mean. That's not nice. And they didn't know any better.
It was their first tournament. Cut them some slack.
Yeah, they literally just learned the game 5 minutes ago, and now you're embarrassing them with this Kosumet Amber Hive Protectors.
The book of Kosumet was the first page on the Heroscapers forums they've ever seen. You know, give them a break.
Yeah. They read the bio and they were just quaking in their boots. Oh my god.
But
Okay.
I think, I do think if you want to have a great time and try out an army that is not too hard to get your hands on for not too much money. If you 3D print Sujoa, bees are a ton of fun and give them a go. They're great.
Super affordable army. Yeah. So this is like seriously, this is one of the armies I would use to introduce someone to VC. So to recap, don't use Quahan spiders. Do use Amber Hive Protectors and Mellifera. Because they're so much fun. Yeah, sweet. Let's move on to I will say those are out of my head now. I feel like I've been cursed. I get
it does sound like I bet Kosumet has some weird witchy voodoo stuff going on.
Yeah, he's
a dark
cool
lord.
necklace.
Yeah. But I will say the next items on your list, I don't have a whole lot, in my experience, to say about them. So I am prepared to just absorb and comment as I can.
That's fine. And I also don't have a ton to say about these. The last 2 we'll cover are Death Reavers with a ranged hero, some of the ones that we listed, and Arrow Gruts. And these will take a ton of time. I've played against Death Reavers Q9 a ton, and Arrow Gruts mimring some, but I don't think these are like super interesting king builds, frankly. So I don't have a ton that I want to say about them, but we should cover them because they are technically king builds, and they are, some of these are relevant in the meta. Just because I personally don't love them doesn't mean they're not like still very relevant to any tournament I go to. So let's start with Death Reavers. This is classified as a king build because, again, 1 offensive unit doing the shooting behind the Death Reavers screen, of which the Death Reavers are a core part of the strategy. But if that unit goes down, you're left with Raylan and Death Reavers. Now, again, Major Q9 is the cheese level build. He's the one that everyone knows. I mean, even people who haven't even heard about Heroscape somehow probably know about Q9 Raylan, right?
They teach you.
It's like you know how when you're a baby you have like certain things like instinctually, like you learn to walk, right?
Yeah.
You learn, you know, like you kind of know how to like swallow and like eat food, and you also know that Q9 Raylan is like super obnoxious and good.
I learned it in kindergarten. They were it was
Part of the
just part of the
curriculum.
curriculum. Right, right.
Yeah, well, because it's important. It is still very relevant. Again, Quehan green scales kind of tear through it. Green scales Nilfheim is winnable if you know what you're doing. I've won that 2 out of 3 times so far in a VCheese setting. And it frankly took the first game to learn what to do, and we can talk about some strategies against this. This was also once thought to be the best. There's a fantastic thread on the forums that I think I'll actually make a video about at some point because it's so entertaining. If this was from like 2010 or something, or like 2008, way back when. It was just after Doc had won a Gen Con with Raylan, Q9, Rats, and I think Offend Hydra, which technically disqualifies it as a king build. And I think the best version of this army is not necessarily a king build. Again, similar to how Greenscales kind of want a couple more tools in their arsenal just for like some very specific matchups. I think this also needs a couple other things, but in terms of framing it as a king build, the thread was something about is competitive Heroscape like 100% solved or something? Or is it like, is competitive scape dominated by like only A+ units, which at that time people were thinking just like Q9, Rats, Raylan, basically. And it's such an entertaining thread, but it's so interesting to look back on that because now I don't like, people still know how to play around this. There is a lot of stuff that can beat this. I think Knights can beat this. I think Heavy Gruts hard counter this. Even like 10th Raylan could beat this.
You think Knights can beat this with the Rats disengaged?
I think a really good Knights player could beat this. Yeah.
Okay, because I feel like that really diminishes Coward's reward, their ability to exploit that. But I guess it's not even really coming into play all that much when the main damage output of the army is far away with Q9.
Yeah, they are planning to churn through Rats and just not take damage from Q9. That's kind of the plan because they've got 4 defense, 5 on height, 6 with jungle or shadow. And they're just gonna let him shoot off his Queglix gun and just tank it, and then roll in.
I guess.
And it would take. I mean, it's such a boring game, and this is like why I would never play this. I don't mind playing against it with the cheese build I play, which is Nilfheim Green Scales, which is an interesting matchup. But you know, it's just a grind, and that's why people hate the Rats because they're so unfun to play against. And then throw in Raylan. And it takes forever, and Q9 it can also be unfun to play against because he can just win games on his own, like as a unit in any other army.
I got into a discussion with someone where they were saying, you know, oh, Q9 is is overrated. I go with Nilfheim every time, and I'm like, I don't know if I agree with that. I think Q9 can easily tank a game and just completely win it.
He is
in a way that Nilfheim can't, just because Nilfheim can go down so easily. But Q9 just takes so much punishment and still stands up. It's just
yes.
yeah. I don't like facing Q9. I don't like facing Rats. Raylan's whatever, you know.
Yeah. Well, she's going to be in every good cheese build for the most part, with few exceptions. Fun fact, Raylan, a non-Raylan build has never won a major V-Cheese event in Heroscape's history. So
interesting. All right, Torkoal the Grubs, where you at? Let's go, guys. Let's get them out.
It's time. Thrax's Dragoon's gonna be putting order markers on.
I'm so excited to try
moving order markers from Q9 to Raylan. That'd be so funny.
Oh my god.
Hey, well, where's she going now? That's really funny. I think I'm not sure if the numbers have changed over the last year. I think at one point we were at only like 4 or 5 non-Raylan builds had ever made semifinals, I think.
Wow.
I can't remember I think it was semifinals, not even finals. I'm not even sure a non-Raylan build has like maybe 1 or 2 to even make finals. But if I remember right from the OST event, there was some discussion because Sir Heroscape made semifinals with his orc build, and people were impressed that he even gotten that far because it's very rare for a non-Raylan build to show up in the top
Yeah.
4 of Avicii. So Raylan, yeah, you're just gonna see her. That's just a fact of things. But reavers and Q9 get super obnoxious. The point of bringing up that thread was that this was once thought to be like literally unbeatable, totally broken. Think of any like game, any other game that you like to play besides Heroscape. There's probably some sort of like super turbo busted combo that got banned, and this was the one, like, the, you know, this was the built to beat. And all of those examples I gave, like, you know, take care of it. Like, you know, Quan, hard counter. Heavy's pretty solid counter, like a really solid counter. Green scales Nilfheim. I don't think Braxis to some extent, and that's not a cheese build you'd see, but Wait and Fire Squads is closer. You could maybe play it if the Q9 player isn't perfect with their rats. And it's fluctuated over time. It will always be relevant, and it will always be on the ban list because Raylin is always going to be on the ban list. I mentioned that like green scales without Raylin is not that great. So if you ban Raylin, you can safely ban Reavers in Q9 and not have to ban anything else, because Death Reavers in Q9 is one of the builds that still remains super, super good without Raylin compared to a lot of other cheat builds. Like, and again, from a perspective of like a tournament director, I am never gonna let someone play Rats Q9. Because that's, we have no
That's good. Yeah.
I don't want someone coming off the street being like, I just picked up the new stuff. I can't wait to play Bears. Can't wait to play Bears, Irene, and Pirates, and then they kill like 3 Death Reavers, and they're like, that sucked. I hated that. It's so
And then they're never gonna want to play Heroscape again.
yeah, it can be so unfun to play against. And I think that's why it got the infamy that it did, because there are things that are better than it, and a lot of people have proven that throughout the years. But playing against green scales Nilfheim does not have quite the same, like, it's never going to be the same level of like unfun and grind. Like, you can always make progress at some point. And also the games take way less time because there's not in between turn actions from your opponent. So this is good. It's not the best, and again, the best version of this army has some other tool. Dogsfen Hydra build is cool. At that point total, I think there are still things that could be better than it. Other tools that you can bring, Krav Maga agents are not too bad. In Avicii's plug and play, they've seen more usefulness, thinking specifically of the Scape Summit Vicii's finals build, which was a bunch of Cathar, Raylin, and Krav Maga.
Yeah.
Super useful tool. Can be super obnoxious for Q9 with 5 defense on those Krav. So
Yeah, let me ask you, what you said earlier, you thought fourth mass or like Wait Then Fire is good into this. You think so? You think a Wait Then Fire army can beat Rats?
yeah, it's tough. The nice thing is you just have range, so ideally you're at some point in the game you're getting an init flip to get a bunch of attacks of 3 and then 4 on Raylin. The other thing is, if the rats come out to try and prevent that, you can sit back outside of where Q9 in Raylin's aura and then his max range is and shoot rats that are outside the aura. Still super obnoxious. Maybe you're only killing 1 per turn, if that, just because of scatter, but they're out of the aura. So the 3v4s or 2v4s are more likely to go through. And again, it's not a super fantastic, like, it's not it's not fun to play.
Yeah.
But I
But
do
just
think they have a chance, especially just
okay.
because that army is passive and Q9 Raylin, like you're not leaving the start zone. I mean, like you're
Right.
touching the first couple spaces of the map, if that. And so that army has a good chance to set up like an interesting wait and fire on Raylin, and then it's a lot easier to kill Q9 from there.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'll trust you on that because I don't have any experience, but just thinking about it, theoretically, I thought like wait then fire. If you don't, most of the wait then fire units they have 6 range, right? So they don't it's okay, but it doesn't get super far. So I feel like they're just inevitably going to be shooting into the rats, and that's exactly what the rats want. And it struck me just the first time I thought about it as not a great matchup, but maybe it's doable. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. And 10th with Raylin are gonna have slightly more defense on height than the 4th mass are, so that's maybe even a little bit better. Just better survivability to keep getting off weight than fires into Q9, who does have to be in weight than fire range if he wants to use the Quiglix gun. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true,
again,
yeah.
it's it you know,
It's
doable. It's doable.
doable.
Yes, I'm not saying it's an easy win. I'm not saying even it's not still like a 60-40 split for the Q9 player, but like
Okay.
it's not an impossible game.
Okay. I misunderstood. I thought you were saying it was a
Yeah.
great counter to Q9, and I was
No, no, no.
is it? Yeah.
I mean,
But it's
it's
doable.
doable. Yeah, like it's
Okay,
not
gotcha.
the invincible. It's not the invincible build that the 2010 forum folks thought that it was.
Gotcha.
And glyphs also matter a lot too.
Right.
You have a little less glyph control with Rats Raylin than you do in normal Rats because you're playing it differently. You're trying to keep the Rats in Raylin's aura as much as possible versus just being obnoxious and generally scouting them out, which you should do if you're a high level player anyway. And the best players do often send Rats outside of Raylin's aura. But if you've got I think the most common like attack boosting glyph is probably Sola Astrid. That benefits. I don't think you're going to see common attack +1 or even Astrid attack +1. But the Sola Astrid is a pretty common VC glyph. You get +1
Mhm.
attack dice once per turn. That can be super useful if you pop off a weight and fire from height with that glyph. You got an attack of 5 dropping down on Q9 or Raylan. That's very good. I'm trying to think what other glyphs would be helpful. Lorja Ivor, which is range +1, that could be massive,
Mhm.
absolutely massive for weight and fire. So some of the glyphs also benefit. Even like Wanik, maybe.
I was gonna say
Um,
Wanick, yeah. I mean,
you know, if your
it
opponent has
it'll kill a couple.
Marku, it's like then no. But
Oh,
if your
yeah,
opponent does
yeah.
not have Marku, even killing one rat, like that's nice. Because you're probably seeing 3 squads at max. Running 4 squads of rats in this army is a waste.
Yeah.
That is a waste of points, even with how cheap
It's
they are.
Wanick is a rat that you can kill without triggering scatter. So do
Yes.
you think that's handy?
Yeah. So the glyphs are gonna matter a lot. If it's like Valda and uh Yingvild,
Yeah.
it's gonna hurt it's gonna hurt the weight and fire player for sure. But yes, yeah, and so 3 squads of rats. I don't know if I've seen more than 3 squads. I think I've seen 2 squads. That's the minimum you can get away with. 1 squad is obviously pretty bad. Even 2 is a little short. 3 is a lot of rats to get through. I think that's the sweet spot for now, but again, people thought 3 was the sweet spot for greenscales, and I would argue that it's actually lower to get other tools in there. So we could see some interesting things either with more or less squads of rats builds that
It's a beautiful
interesting
game, and
Q9
it is
builds.
just
It really is.
constantly evolving.
It really is. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on Q9, and we'll just kind of skim through some of the other ones here
Sure.
because they're way less relevant in a cheese meta. Can still be useful in certain instances, but these are kind of offbeat king builds now, like Major Q10. He can do the job in the right setting, but you know, much
Yeah.
better to put Q9 with something else that has offensive potential rather than just rats. Right, and it's the same thing with, like, Krav. I actually saw this, in an online season. The build was actually with Ashra, and then Raylin. They basically just never leave the start zone.
Yeah,
and they just
Asher Raylan is disgusting.
it's super obnoxious. Yeah, and they literally did not leave the start zone the entire game. That was game playing against Romans. I didn't see any other games with the build, but that's the idea. More than any of the other builds, you just do not put the crab in any danger. And it worked. I mean,
I actually I did I did terribly. I think this was my worst tournament, and it was after I did that whole 2023 year in review video, so it wasn't actually captured in my records. But I did a tournament where it was you can only bring one squad and one hero card. So you had to pick, and I figured most people were going to be going with a bonding squad and then one hero card that they could bring.
Yeah.
But I wanted to switch it up and do something different, so I brought a bunch of Hoplatrons as my hero and the Morrow Warriors as my squad. Just to switch it up, so that my core was heroes and my
yeah, cool.
my squad was the unique one. And I think it could have done a lot better than it did. I just played it very, very, very poorly. And one of the things that it's almost like a weird king build twist where the games I lost, which frankly was most of them that day, it was just a bad day. It was a very bad day. But it was a good day. It was Heroscape, but you know what I mean. But the games that I lost handily were the ones where I squandered my Mara Warriors. It was almost like the Mara Warriors became the kings I needed to protect.
Right.
Yeah, and so Craver, I look at them kind of similarly in that when you put an order, you kind of just want to keep activating them, like
Yep.
you almost want to spend a whole round on them. I don't want to take one turn with the Crav and then move something else. Usually, if I get them going, I want to just keep them going until they've killed their points. I don't know if that's the right way to play them, but that's how I've seen them.
Yeah, yeah, and it's a much different way than this like Raylan Asher build where they're not like sharks that are going out trying to kite like either an opening or a closing. They're just like the main force. You just kind of sit there. You just wait. You just wait for your opponent to. You maybe move a couple Asher around, and they did take turns with Ashera. Eventually, the Romans engaged because Burks had died. That the big thing was not getting paralyzing stares on the Krav.
Oh yeah.
So Burks had died, and that was pretty much the game. The Romans did crack through a couple Ashra, and at that point, the opponent, the player playing the Ashra, took a turn with them just to get them back into position. The difference with Ashra, and this might also slide it out of a king build, although the idea is like the most king build idea there is with the Grom, but the Ashra have the same offensive output as the Krov. So if you are forced to take a turn with them, even if it's in an end game, you don't lose too much. But the idea of the army is so king-like. I felt like it was worth a mention, and I've never seen it with Raylan Rats, because again, I feel like they're just better. They're just better options. Again, this is a king build that exists. Not saying you should play it, not saying anyone has played it, but honorable mention.
Sure.
Same thing with Vulcan Mech and Centaborgs.
Yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
The rats are actually great at like tying up figures for the Vulcan Mech's normal attacks while they develop, because their big thing is the flamethrower. They got a big attack of 4 that shoots out, but they still have a decent normal attack of 3 at 6 range. I don't think this benefits from Raylan though, because they really want to get to height and like spread out to their best positions. So again, I don't think this is what you want to do for your king build, but it is technically like a similar Soulborg build, Death Reaver screen, thing. I again wouldn't encourage it, but I think like this would technically be a king build, but it would play a lot differently because I think your rats would want to be extremely active. So I don't think you would benefit from Raylan. I think you'd benefit from Reavers.
And if you do start losing Vulcan mechs, then your game's going to look pretty bad.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, so a king build in the technical sense again, but this would also be something where you would probably want some form of, well, don't want to say redundancy because you've already got that, but you want something to fall back on, besides Vulcan mechs, unless it's a very low point to, like if it's a 300 point game, you've got 3 squads of rats and Vulcan mechs. That's pretty solid. There's not a lot of stuff at 300 points. that are going to get through both the rats and the redundancy markers before the Vulcan mechs just burn everything. So that could work, but like at a very niche format or point total, maybe a figure limit. Yeah. Anyway, worth a mention. And also dragons. I haven't personally seen this. I'm sure it's been played out there out of all the competitive games. Although I'm not sure why you'd want rats over green scales. I truly can't think of a single reason. So this would also have to be like format specific. If there was like, you can't have bonding or something like
Other
no.
than the fact that the rats can move without you activating them.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, you lose.
I don't know.
Yeah, you just lose that to the bonding advantage, which is so heavy. There's a similar idea, like dragons with like dragons with knights, I think was actually pretty common back in the day, but that's not a king build. That's like pseudo screen. Like knights can be a screen. They have that option to just sit there and tank. And so you have the flexibility to turn it into a king build. It's almost like this weird hybrid of like, I kind of want the knights to do offensive things. That's kind of why they're there. But if I have to, depending on the matchup, I can kind of just set up a knight screen and then Nilfheim comes out or Braxis comes out and does her thing. Even like Molten Claw or Zelrig could be decent with that. I think Nilfheim was the most popular. It's the best classic dragon. So that Nilfheim and Knights is a viable. Again, I can't say king build, but sort of like a transformer, like how it's you can turn it into a king build mid game, like it, and then it's a king build because you've got your screen and you've got one figure doing most of the damage, and that's where you're at. But again, of course, if Nilfheim were to die, you would still have a decent amount of backup. So that build itself is actually pretty strong. I flirted. I actually played something similar at Midwest Melee 2 or 3, and did all right with it. Because common squads were limited. Common squads had a huge tax on them. So 2x knights felt a lot better than 2x green scales actually in that instance.
That's true. That's true. If you'd hit a limit on the commons, that's an interesting decision you make, and I would agree that the knights are better there.
So this is very, very format specific, and now that green scales exist, it's just not seen. But I think it's still an option. With Death Reavers, maybe not, but all right, let's close this out with arrow gruts.
And this one, I'm interested in your thoughts on this one. Because I don't have any experience with just mimring in arrow gruts, and from what I'm reading here, that's what's being imagined. Like if you added a swag, it's not in the king build anymore. So in what scenario do you not bring a swag with this?
So that's the funny thing. In order to talk about this as a king build, we have to talk about probably the worst possible version of arrow gruts mimring. So first of all, I'll say mimring is better with arrow gruts simply because you don't mind burning through one measly little arrow grut to get to a juicy target or targets that you've gotten with your fire line. So that is a big advantage because they're a lot cheaper per figure, significantly cheaper per figure than green scales are. And they also have range. Granted, it's not very strong on their own, but they also have range, so they can actually do some damage staying closer to mimring and protecting mimring in that way, rather than green scales being pure melee, but still wanting to stay close to mimring and making it a lot more difficult to screen in that way, unless you have Raylan, in which case it makes it difficult to shoot the fire line over because you want to hop around. So it's kind of this cyclical, like, poor version of a build. However, in that version, mimring is the king, and if mimring goes down, you're losing a lot of stuff. Now, this is obviously like bad. That's the thing. Like, there's so many other there's like an infinite combination of Arrogrett's builds, and out of that like multiverse of things you could bring, this is the worst one. Have you ever seen Everything Everywhere All at Once?
I have not. It's on my list.
It's an excellent movie, but this is like the most minor spoiler, but they find the worst version of the main character,
Okay.
at least according to them. And there's some different meanings behind that. But like, this is that build.
Yeah.
This is the worst version of any build. Just that's in ring.
You were including this on the list because it is technically a king build, but
Yeah.
by no means recommending it. When I looked at all this, I was like, okay, I guess you can run it. I don't know why you would. But you could, like
It needs to be discussed. And I think Casters of Valhalla briefly, maybe not even briefly, but they did discuss Arrogrettes versus Greenscales. Again, very similar points.
for memory.
But yes, but
yeah, I remember
in that instance, I don't think like they didn't present a formal, like a super rigid definition for a king build. If you're bringing in swags, you're expecting the Arrogrettes to do some work. And so by that definition, while Mimring is still producing a large majority of the damage, even if it's like a weird like passive way for how you're forcing your opponents to position your figures and maybe setting up better shots for your Arrogrettes. If Mimring dies, you still have options with Arrogrettes and Swags. Like they can absolutely close out a game, no problem. So and you have another bonder already right there that kind of disqualifies it from being a king build. So just Arrogrettes and Mimring, and again, it's difficult to imagine a world because those figures are so cheap. It's like it'd have to be like a 300-point game where it's like just Mimring in 3 squads of
maybe a conversation. There's like a micro game.
Yeah, there's like a threshold where like some of these builds maybe start to do okay, but in order to like keep it to a strict definition of a king build, the only thing you can do is add more Arrogrettes. So now you have like 15 squads of Arrogrettes and Mimring, and you're like, oh, now I'm at 320 points. Like,
Yeah,
still not even close to.
they're not going to do anything.
Yes, and in a lot of formats, the figure limit is going to restrict king builds a lot more than the point limit.
That is
So that's what it comes down to here. So obviously, like Krug would be a much better use of those extra 120 points than 3 more squads of Arrogrettes, but it's not really a king build. So there's obviously way better versions of this build. Any other bonder adding, I mean, Swags bond, and then as soon as you add Swags, you're relying on Arrogrettes to do the bulk of the damage. I think there are viable versions where you don't take Swags and you're still relying on the multiple bonders to do damage. I think that's a perfectly viable build in certain point and figure combinations.
So like you like just Arrogrettes and then Krug and Mimring.
Yes, I think that should totally.
I think that can do stuff.
I think that's totally viable. I also think like lots of Swags and like a weaker bonder is also like kind of an interesting way to go about it.
I did go to a Monster Mash tournament. I think I talked about it in that big video I did, but I didn't win and I didn't do super well. I won a couple games, but it was like maybe a couple squads of Arrogrettes, not many, a couple Swags, and then Krug and Mimring. And I was surprised at the games that I did win. Like even the games I lost, like the Arrogrettes and the Swags, they didn't do a whole lot. Like just Krug and Mimring carried me through a lot of games at that day. So
yeah,
it's a great combo.
That combo is lethal. But yeah, I think that's super viable. I think just like a ton of Swags, and then like I know Sheep in OST ran Raylin, maybe 4 or 5 squads of Arrogrettes, Ice Troll Berserker, and then like 6 Swag Riders.
Wow.
To set up like the super grut,
Yeah.
And it went pretty far. I know it wasn't in the finals, but I know it made top cut. So it and
I
it's just so many options. The Arrogruts are honestly a beautiful army, and that is one I wish I was more familiar with, because they're also a ton of fun. But do not play it as a king build.
No,
do not,
no.
do not. But honorable mention, I guess, because technically it is a king build, or you can make one out of it. I mean, you could do Arrogruts. You could do Arrogruts Krug. Like, that's all. Like, technically, I guess Arrogruts Krug is like kind of. I mean, still in that instance, I think you almost expect Arrogruts to do more than Krug in most cases. Because Krug's true attack to start out is you're kind of waiting until he gets charged up to do something. So Arrogruts are still expected to do a lot. So I think Ice Troll might almost be more of a true king build than Krug. If Ice Troll watches it,
I don't have a ton of experience with the Ice Troll, but I feel like he often, I mean, understandably, he gets overshadowed by Krug and Mimring, but I feel like there's a place for him, and I kind of want to explore him more. But
yeah,
I have any experience.
He's a bruiser. I have seen him in both of the competitive games I've seen him in. It's kind of funny because the first half of him getting played is him just going absolutely ham on anything he can get his hands on, and then getting like one shot the next turn. And so it's like this reign of terror cut instantly short by like the most pathetic roll you've seen. And it's like, okay, we're he's got his foot, he's straddling two different worlds of being like really, really good and also just like the weakest figure you've ever seen. So that I don't
Kind
know.
of cool in the end game though, when you don't have a lot you're dealing with and he's just cold regenerating all the time.
It's so it's so dangerous. You kind of need to take him out in one swoop. But again, if he's saved for an end game, that's not really a king build.
Right.
There's probably a whole video to be made on this army archetype, which we will not go into now, but it does technically hit a king build. Now, Mimring Raylin Arrogruts gets a little closer to being competitive. And that's actually if you add in a couple Swag Riders there, you've got yourself a cheese build.
Yeah.
Now again, adding those couple Swags does turn it away from king build, but you're really close. You're almost a king build there. And that is actually like at a competitive level that can be pretty solid in cheese, honestly. Because that 8 range, man, that matters a lot. That matters a whole lot. So
I used to think Krug, again, I don't have all the experience with it. I used to think Krug was better as the bonding option for this army, but I'm pretty quickly coming around to Mimring. Just I know.
Yeah, 8 range is nasty. Range just has an inherent advantage in the game. And I think people again it's interesting because this kind of ebbs and flows. There was a lot of like there's been a lot of discussion around this too. But there's just an inherent advantage to range, and I think Mimring just has so many tools. Again, a ranged special is guaranteed to crack through basically any defensive ability in the game, both by virtue of being ranged and by virtue of being a special. It's going to obliterate almost every defensive ability that you can see. And the ones that it doesn't get through, like stealth dodge, are really susceptible to Arrowgrut pings, which is funny. So that weakness, anything that might be a weakness to Mimring is kind of covered by Arrowgruts and Swags, who are also very fast. So also very potentially deadly threat to like Krav or I could even see like Iron Golem. Obviously, is not like something you'd see a lot, but does protect himself very well from Fireline. But Arrowgruts with 1 Swag on height probably gonna take him down pretty quick. No, this build has a ton of potential, but not as a king build. It just does exist as a king build. And I would say if you had to play Mimring and someone forced you to play a pure king build, you should pick Arrowgruts still over Green Scales, I think. Just because you're just getting a lot lot less value out of
Mimring is the one example, yeah, where I think arrows are better. Where well, I mean, he's the only one that can bond with
Yeah.
the arrows, but
Yeah.
yeah, I would go with arrows too.
Yeah, the multiple bonding options for dragons is very interesting. We talked about spiders, arrow gruts. I wouldn't like mind seeing more. I think it'd be interesting to have,
If Age of Annihilation comes out with something cool for a bonding option for Zenithrax, but they seem to be staying away from common squads, so maybe that never happens.
for
But
now.
even like a funky and powerful unique squad.
Yeah,
like
we've got
Zenithrax.
unique bondays too.
The bears are great.
Yeah, you need bonding exists in the game. Something comes out that bonds with like just Othcrick, like something that bonds with their species rather than I guess species of dragon, their class rather than their species. So that it's not green scales where it's any dragon, but just like one or two specific dragons could be cool. I like the options. The options are interesting. And like we've seen with spiders, green scales have blown the meta wide open. Like still 12 years after Quaon's release, we're like inching closer to what might be the best build, but still probably aren't there. So yeah, so that would be super cool, something to see. But that finally concludes our
We've gotten through them all, yes.
6 hours later. Hopefully this was still entertaining. I know a lot of our viewers are familiar with BC, but many are not. And so hopefully this gave some insight into those as well. And then I hope that even for the players who have been playing B Cheese for ages and think they have a handle on it, I hope some of these hot takes help expand your horizons and maybe provide some food for thought about all of these bonders that some tend to be forgotten about, like like Caligrith perhaps. But hopefully this is an interesting discussion regardless. Hopefully we're entertaining even even throughout the lecturing on why you should take green scales over spiders and why you should take Torkalna over Wosaga.
The big takeaway is get yourself some bees and have a good time.
Yes, that's that's the most important thing. Is everyone should get some bees, because my God, are they so much fun. All right, DogginDays, I will let you plug anything you would like to at this point. I know you mentioned you might have some videos coming out soon. Those might be out before this is, unfortunately. But if you have, I'll link his channel below. I encourage everyone to go subscribe. DogginDays has been an excellent guest on this podcast. It's been so much fun to talk with you about this. Thanks for letting me drone on and on about spiders and green scales.
And no, man, it's always a pleasure. I learn a lot from talking to you, so I'm always happy to do it, and hopefully people enjoyed our banter. So that's good.
Yeah.
And if you, I'm gonna take your offer to plug.
Yes.
So yeah, I do have a YouTube channel. It's same name, DogginDays. I do giant overlong videos where I like to just talk and get into nitty gritty about what I think about certain units. I'm not super immersed in the online Heroscape competitive scene, so you take everything I say with a lot of salt. But I try to be fun.
That's why I brought you on for this, is because I knew this was going to take like 7 hours to record. So I was like, this it's got to be DogginDays. It's perfect for the overlong, nitty gritty. Yeah, this is a perfect guess. New perspectives are needed. New perspectives are very welcome. You made me think differently about the Nagrubs. You challenged me, and I think that's excellent. This has been really insightful. I'm so grateful that you could join me in my cozy study here. Viewer, leave a like if this topic was helpful to you, and subscribe if you'd like to see more topics like this. We're entering a new age of competitive Heroscape, and we'd love to bring you along for the ride. And of course, while listening to Heroscape Stratagems is clearly the best way to improve at the game, the next best way is to join the online community or find your nearest local tournament. And if there isn't one, well, you can do what I did and start your own. Thanks again, DogginDays. We will see you in Valhalla.
Absolutely. Thanks, Reggae.